از انسان بودنم شرم می کنم. گاهی می خواهم انسان نباشم، گوسفند باشم، پا روی سبزه ها بگذارم، دلی را دفن نکنم، گرگی باشم، گوسفندها را بدرم. اما بدانم کارم از روی ذات است، اینستینکت، نه هوس، پلژر. خفاش باشم که شبها گردش کنم با چشمهای کور، اما خوابی را پرپر نکنم. کلاغی باشم که قارقار کنم، اما پرهایم را رنگ نکنم. دلی را با دروغ به دست نیاورم. چه میدانم؟ شاید حیوانات به قصد توهین. When the animals and the beasts of nature would like to insult each other, they might call each other همدیگر را انسان خطاب کند. او انسان. Welcome to the Hazara Pioneers Library, presenting to you A Vizier's Daughter by LILLIAS Hamilton. جنگ حاضره را قصه شما نمتای. بریم که داستان خیلی دلانگیز و دلسوز و دلاویز، مهرانگیز، خاطر آمیز. For you Nosago, especially particularly who are going to call your Ajay and Bakul, who is still breathing. You would like to share a breath before you go with flowers on the gravestones, or may not be even evil because you are. Hazara communities around the world, wherever you are, this is your story, war and migration. And we're talking about the start of the war, the Hazara war that happened in 1890s. And this is the story of Gul Begum, a Vizier's daughter. You have up to chapter 15 known what has happened to the traitor Muhammad Jan, what state they are in. They are under investigation now, and we enter chapter 16, a prisoner, yak bandi, asir, chirkhama, da awali jangi hazra, da khidmat shumo, hazir. Gul Begum had made the suggestion regarding Muhammad Jan and the bribe he had possibly received from her father. Gufta budna ki hum az shumo paisa girftam az babezma igadara. Knowing perfectly well that though undoubtedly a traitor to his country and capable of any conceivable crime, yani gaddartarin adam asti, he was innocent on this particular occasion. Ye kho sar kho chap kad az kar ki bor tu shayad un qad padar az mam ek sazbaz dashta bud albatta dil khub khabar dare ki ras nahi hai. She had said it without ever considering the consequences. In a moment of excitement and fury against the man who had not only wrecked her life, but had been discovered in the very act of betraying her father. چیکار کنه خودت نفر که نکو زندگیش رو تباه و برباد کرد، بلکه پدرش را هم اغوا دلجی کرد تقریبا. And who would, she was sure, be ready at any time to lead his country's enemies into the most secret fastnesses of their mountain houses, not merely to save his own neck by going to taking refuge in Kabul. He could have done that, but to earn the paltry sums of money with which any Hazara mean enough to accept them as being bribed by the Afghan commanders. And this man had thought to be her husband, She shivered as she recalled the scenes she had gone through, and then shivered again as she heard the cries of the tortured wretch outside. "He is receiving his just reward," she murmured. But still she felt sick and faint and longed to run away and hide herself, longed to take back her angry words. Even though her doing so were to release her enemy. Suddenly, an Afghan soldier entered the room where she sat crouching and trying to shut out those awful cries from the ears of her little sister, who, hearing the noise and gentle commotion, had sought refuge in her arms. "Is your name Gulbegum, woman?" he asked authoritatively. "Wakatu, tu Gulbegumi?" "Yes, it is," she said without rising. "What do you want with me?" "Chimekaya Janma." "Stand up when I speak to you and answer my questions truthfully, or it will be the worse for you. Do you hear?" The man went on. The girl rose, wrapped her little sister in a quilt, and made her comfortable, then went and leaned against the door, looking out into the night. The dargah takyana. "Are you a married woman or single?" the soldier interrogated. "I'm not married," the girl said, almost inaudibly. "I'm not married." "That man there, Muhammad Jan," pointing in the direction of the shed, "says you are his wife and begs as a reward for his services to us that you be restored to him." اون میگه که تو خاطوی زوی و مخاطوی خور پس میخواه اما خدمت که انجام داده جاسوسی که بریز مکده اونو خواسته که ما تو رو پس بیدیم درش اون جیو چل را برده. "He lies," she said again in the same low tone. دروغ میگه. "He wished to make me his wife when I went to a visit to his house some time ago." مخانش میمان رفته دی میخواست دلش میخواست قزمه عروسی کنه. "Because he wanted the dowry my father would have given him with me. But I am not his wife and never will be. I would rather die." "Is there anyone here who can prove that you are not his wife?" Shahid Bairu. The man asked again, not so roughly this time. Perhaps, though he was too hard to be touched by her evident distress, he was not altogether insatiable to her beauty. "Let him bring the witnesses of the marriage." She said quietly, feeling that she had gained point somewhere without knowing exactly where. Give me a point است که تو بگی خبر تو شاهدای خبری که کی ارسشته بود کی بود شاهد. "That is not possible at this time," he replied more harshly. "Do not dare to trifle with me. مسخره منی قزمه. Where is your mother or some relation whom I can ask?" "My mother is here, but she is beside herself with grief," and would say anything, hardly knowing what she said. The girl replied anxiously. She did not know what trouble her mother might get her into. "Then call your mother or stay. I will call her myself." And he kicked the door of the inner apartment where the other women and children sat crouching in abject terror. repeated with the roar of his heavy boot. "The mother of Gul Begum is to come here with me. I wish to speak to her," she said. The poor woman came forward, trembling but speechless. "Is this your daughter, woman?" "Yes, sir, it is," she said faintly. "Is she married or single?" "I tell you, I'm not married," the girl put in, trying to give her mother the cue. But the poor woman was far too terrified to take it. "She is married." Then, seeing that the soldier turned round to Gul Begum and advanced towards her menacingly, she added hurriedly, "At least she is named on a man. The naam yak nafar asta." A neighbor, and has stayed in his house as his affianced bride. "What does this mean?" the man asked angrily. "You pack of lying hounds! Sagai drogoi, you want tying up to the post and beating too?" I think, then turning to Gul Begum, "Listen to me," he went on. "If you are that man's wife, go to him. You're free. You are his payment of a debt we owe him. If you're single, go get yourself ready and come with me. You're all war prisoners, slaves of the AMIR, and must come with me to Kabul." Gul Begum shivered. Ya Ilahi. Her mother flung herself at her captor's feet. "Oh, mercy. Mercy, show us some mercy, Ramkin. Ya Khuda," she pleaded. "I have little children and old mother. Do not punish us for all this girl's sake. How can we go to Kabul in this weather? How can we get there in this storm? Let us at least spend the rest of the night here. Good sir, hear my prayer, and let us wait till morning." But she might as well have addressed the raging elements. "Get ready to start as I tell you, and don't loiter. I have orders to take you to the camp at once. Don't keep me waiting here," was all the reply she got. "Zud jamkin. Kirawanastim. Who is to saddle the ponies? The woman whined piteously. "None of the men seem to be about the place. I suppose, like their masters, they have run away instead of staying here to protect us." "The ponies? Don't you trouble about those, my good woman. We will take good care of them." The soldier said laughingly, "You did not think you were going to ride to Kabul? Sora Kabul reached then, Shama. Did you? But make haste, or I shall have to help you with a stick." Zuchit ki the chob the janchim rasid. There goes the call. Come, march. Harakat. "We must get on our things. You would not have us run barefoot on these hills? Look, here, my good woman, out at that door. Bushu. No trifling here with me." And as he spoke, he pushed her outside. "You go out there and stay there. I'll stand the others after you. Bushu." Meanwhile, Gul Begum had not been idle. She had seen at a glance that resistance was useless, impossible. And picking up first one child and then the other, had clothed it and as best as she could in the hurry of the moment. Then turning to the recess where the stores were all kept, had seized every warm wrap she could lay her hands upon, urging her old grandmother at the same time to make what speed she could. But the confusion was terrible. The children wakened from their sleep. Cried and would not be persuaded to help themselves to any extent. And Gul Begum, who had been concerning herself chiefly about their clothes, had no time to seize any food before the soldiers returned. This time with a stick in his hand, which he flourished menacingly, then brought down, but not heavily, across the girl's shoulder. Look, here, you woman, out you go. And heedless of cries and tears, he drove them all out before him. The scene outside was one never to be forgotten. Gul Begum had thought that they alone in their house were to be the victims, and had been reproaching herself, thinking she was the cause of all this trouble. But in that she found she was mistaken. With the dawn, which was now breaking, the storm had lulled somewhat. And before her, as far as she could see, were figures moving in the dim morning light. Figures chiefly of women and children, driven and hustled by the soldiers, first here and then there. Shireen and her mother were standing huddled together against a wall. Neither had put on their boots, and both were but very lightly clad. They had been torn half asleep from their warm beds. And many others were in a still more pitiable condition. In all that great seething crowd, it was almost impossible to find anyone, and Gul Begum looked around in vain, trying to discover her mother. Oh, such a wailing and crying. Such sobs and such despair. Here, what fortitude and courage. There, what dull obstinacy and indifference. But it was the weeping of the children, the crowds of half-clad, sleepy girls, exposed to the night wind. The Koistani Hazara, but that went most to Gul Begum's heart. Her little brother, the youngest of the family, she had folded in a great shawl and soon hushed to sleep upon her breast, even among the noise and confusion that everywhere prevailed. Her youngest sister, a little child of barely 9, Gulbegum herself in miniature, Gulbegum, clung to her sister's skirt in terror. But she had ceased crying and kept looking about, wondering what was the matter. Fatima, the elder girl, wailed loudly. Hardly knowing why she cried. Then suddenly the order was given to march. Harakat! And the whole crowd was driven down the hill and on the way to Kabul. Roads, there were none. Only the pathway that had been made by the trampling of many feet for many years. But there they were, these hundreds of human beings, driven like so many sheep along a sheep track, the lambs following as best they could. My feet, they are getting all cut. I can't walk on these stones barefoot. A woman kept crying bitterly. And where are my children? Will no one find my children and my mother? She was some distance on in front at first, but as she got further and further behind, owing to the tenderness of her feet, Gulbegum recognized her mother's voice. Here, mother, we're here, she cried. And Shireen and my aunt, Tamama Minjia, I have given aunt your boots, for her feet were getting cut too. But you can have mine. I'm used to going barefooted and prefer it. And so saying, almost without stopping in her walks, the girl pulled off her long boots and handed them to her mother. And I am cold, the wretched woman sobbed, almost breaking down now she had got back among her children. Here, take the boy and wrap the shawl around you both. The girl said again soothingly, it's all right now, mother. Whatever happens, we are all together, so that nothing can be so bad as if we were all separated. Ho! There! No loitering! One of the soldiers called out. Who is that blocking the way? For it took just a few seconds to effect these changes, and this time Shireen, the furthest behind of the party, got a poke in the back with the end of a stick. Relieved of her burden, Gulbegum was the brightest of the company and did much to cheer the others on their way. Now giving this little child a lift, now that, and as the light grew brighter, the very soldiers noted her handsome form and face and spoke more kindly to her than to the rest. But what a dreary, weary trail of human beings. For the sake of the geology. A few men servants and field laborers who had been left behind when the rest of the men had been called off to take part in the war were to be seen here and there. But the great bulk of all that crowd consisted of women and children who, now that they had got well on the road, marched for the most part in silence, except where a child's wail or the fretful cry of an infant made itself heard. این کاروان ضعیفترین کاروان که در سکوت سن کابل امیتر اسیر روان است در سکوت مطلق فقط گای زوستو کی وینا دل آدم را پهرانه. On they marched. The night wind softened down to a pleasant morning breeze, and that in its turn disappeared, and the sun broke out in all its strength. But still the molted crowd marched on. Qafila rawana. They had only halted twice. فقط دو استاد شده بودن دو دفعه. Chiefly it seemed to Gul Begum to let the soldiers have some food. که اسکرا کم استراحت کنه لقمانان بخورمی دو دفعه اینا فقط استاد شدن. But they had been kind to her and had let her have a piece of bread now and again, which she had at once given to her little sisters. And more than once they had pointed out to her a spring of fresh clear mountain water at which she had slaken her thirst. The sun, as it rose higher and higher, streamed down on the white stones and sand and baked them as though they had just come out of an oven, scorching the fugitives' feet. It streamed on their heads and made them draw their shawls more closely around them. Gul Begum was accustomed to roam the mountains barefoot. Pailudam domani koistan ramorat as a pesh, but that had been at her leisure. As marzi salai khod qbul mashdu. Pailud koistan. And at the hour she herself had chosen, this constrained march, barefoot on those burning stones, became very wearisome. And when the midday halt was called under the shade of some mulberry trees by a running stream, she was thankful to dangle her poor, aching, swollen limbs in the cold water. The children ate the fallen mulberries. Then stretched their weary limbs and slept in the refreshing shade. Shake down some more, Gul Begum said to one of the soldiers. Kam digam tu takubere. Do for the love of heaven. See how hungry these children are. And he had not only shaken the tree, but had climbed up. And after eating as many as he could himself, had brought down a handful. She ate them hungrily and wished that at any cost she seized some of the bread she had baked overnight. And which lay in piles on a shelf in the house she had been so suddenly forced to quit. How easily it might have been brought, and now they were so short of food. So many mulberries, to children unaccustomed to them, could not be anything but harmful. But still they must eat something. Presently she fell asleep, and when she woke, the shadows had lengthened by many feet and the evening breeze was beginning to rise again. Where are we to sleep tonight? She asked. You will see, was the answer she received. How soon shall we be in Kabul? Kai mirsim? She asked again. Khuda medanat, God knows, the soldier answered. Tomorrow, or the next day, or a week, or two. How can I tell? Marchi malum. Tabi amr. The girl sighed. But the children, they will never stand this march, she said. And just look at my feet. They are better now, but by tomorrow night I shan't be able to put them on the ground. Can't help that, the soldier said again. Why did you give away your boots? You had some on when you started. Oh, it was to my mother I gave them, the girl answered simply. I could not walk in boots to see her feet bare. As you please, Salait, the man answered carelessly. It's not much of a matter that to me and my way of thinking. They halted at night in a village and were packed as tightly as they could be squeezed into the rooms, or rather sheds allotted to them. It was a terrible night. Many of the children had a touch of sun fever. And in addition to this, the mulberries had disagreed with several. And made them sick and restless. Give me some water. Water, Gul Begum's little sister kept crying. I am so hot and thirsty. Oh God, my darling is ill, the elder girl moaned. God make you well, my sweet one. But still the little thing wailed and cried. Give me some water, sister mine. I'm so thirsty. Water, water. All night the girl sat by her and tried to soothe her. And when day dawned, she slept. Then Gul Begum put down her head and slept too. She could do no more. She was exhausted. The child seemed better in the morning, but languid. Towards noon, when the sun again broke out in all its fury, she got worse. The fever returned with redoubled strength, and the child could not drag her poor, weary limbs along. Oh God, Gul Begum cried, have pity, but there seems no God to hear. Only the soldiers, and they hurried on, the laggers behind, and plied with sticks, zichin, tuntun raborin, not mercilessly, however, on those who seemed too weary to drag themselves forward. Gul Begum tried to carry her little sister, but her own feet were sore. Tamam paycha uli lazda. She lagged behind in her turn and had a stick laid across her back, just as though she had been a sheep straying from the flock. She borrowed her boots back from her mother, but found she could not get them on. Her feet were so swollen. At last, they halted again for the midday rest, but Gul Begum got no repose. The suffering child kept crying and could not sleep or eat. But why dwell on events so painful, so harrowing? The next night, but one, Gul Begum's darling died. Died in a raging fever. And 2 nights later, the boy died too. Oh, the wailing and weeping throughout the camp. Dozens of little children perished on that long, burning road. And so exhausted were their mothers and relations at length that in most cases they become almost thankful to be rid of their burdens. Not so Gul Begum. She nearly broke her heart. She mourned her little sister, her flower, her favorite, more deeply than did the mother who had given her birth. But still, they journeyed on. When I was reading it before presentation today, every time I open a chapter for the first time and go through this, it evokes, as if pressing some buttons, evokes some hidden silence, moans and cries under the ground, buried but alive, forgotten cries of a Vizier's daughter, 130 years before. In these times, a nation is uprooted, and the narration goes through the heart of a Vizier's daughter, a Hazara beauty, whose intelligence and pride did not bring her any good luck so far. It's quite an operation, isn't it? It's like you're cutting through and you're seeing things and you're discovering and finding that I have forgotten some wounds here. These wounds are not healed, they're still there. So, my dear Nosago, I hope you will have an opportunity to listen to these stories and play it with, if the Bakul and Achul are around. You can narrate, see if the language connection is still there. It's just one generation in between. I mean, you may be in Melbourne, in London, New York, in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in Indian subcontinent, in Russian belt. Wherever you may be online, the reason we are bringing the Hazara Pioneers Library, the story of a Vizier's daughter, the Hazara War, a tale of the Hazara War, just one tale, one story, to you in English, so that you are given a priority. Almogar the azirgi present magadi khumo priority the bakul the but bakul to this English speaking, mostly online because this is the medium, and the story is written originally in English by LILLIAS Hamilton herself, so that you have a better understanding, a connection built to your geography and history, particularly your story. Where are you coming from? Because wherever around the world you may be, you will be asked, who are you? And then you have a story to tell, which is very painful. And we are, because it's our collective pain, dardi mushtarak mein basha, we hope that this pains your heart enough to start exploring, and the closest person you can contact is your bakul. Symbolically speaking, whatever is left of your previous generations, especially the intangible cultural heritage, the غیر قابل حس, dastan, story, memory, connection, shanacht. And the shanacht, we have a slogan: it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, because insan, Nowroz Zawar, is basically, you can see, is the combination of two extremes. And this is the story of insan. One insan is doing to other insan. So what is insan? Probably yamu insana ki az insan budanam sharm bayad dasht ki hayvanat vahshi ek diye khaboga ki oh insan, yeah, chi insan hai. In Ali Mana Hazira, I will leave it to you, and I hope that you have a great time exploring some very close topics about being yourself, being a human being, and then being of a certain identity, a certain color of human being, a certain shape and history and story, and that distinctiveness is a birthright of every child born outside the territory of the cultural sphere. And this, I hope, is a service provided to you guys as a cultural service, provided to you all by the very passionate and patient Chagar, who is very dedicated, and he would like to bring you much more stories, hopefully some Hazargi stories in the future. We're getting on there, but hopefully this one has broken everybody's heart. Not hopefully, I mean definitely it has broken everybody's heart. That's why Haikido Nowroz Zawar.